Help today, just like normal. I have two passages that need to be looked up. So I need someone to grab Matthew chapter 14, verses 24 through 33. Who's going to do that one for me? Matthew 14, verses 24 through 33. (24 through 33). Nice try, Jeff. Okay, Kevin, you're going to get that one. And then I need someone to take a look at Mark chapter 6. Mark chapter 6, verses 47 through 52. Brittany? All right, so Kevin and Brittany, when I call upon you, it will be your time. All right, you ready? So you guys are ready. I'm ready. Let's go. We're going to start talking about John. We're going to talk about John chapter 6, verses 16 through 21. We're just going to go ahead and start by reading it, and then I'll have Kevin and Brittany go. So that evening, Jesus' disciples went down to the shore to wait for him. But as the darkness fell and Jesus still hadn't come back, they got into the boat and headed across the lake towards Capernaum. Soon a gale swept down upon them, and the sea grew very rough. They had rowed 3 or 4 miles when suddenly they saw Jesus walking on the water towards the boat, and they were terrified. But he called out to them, "Don't be afraid, I am here." Then they were eager to let him in the boat, and immediately they arrived at their destination. Kevin, go. Brittany, go. So, once again, we have the same event described from 3 different perspectives, right? You have John that concentrated specifically on Christ. You have Matthew that talked more about the experience of Peter. And you have Mark that talked about what the goal was, what the purpose was, and the fact that their hearts were hardened. So, the one thing that maintained consistent in all of those was the condition of the disciples in the boat. Now, I want you to get your imagination going. I want you to envision this. So, the Sea of Galilee, it's actually a lake. It's a pretty big lake. It's about 13 miles long and about 7 miles wide. And this lake is situated, it's called Lake Kinneret. That's its official name, but it goes by Sea of Galilee or Sea of Tiberias. They call it all sorts of things, but it's deep freshwater lake. It's surrounded by hills and mountains. You've got the Mediterranean Sea, you've got some mountains, you've got the lake and some hills. So it's basically kind of like in a valley, kind of like what we are. The winds just all of a sudden will rush down and create rough seas. It'll create huge gale force winds, and it just comes upon you suddenly. And of course, this time, this day and age, they didn't have Doppler radar, right? So they're not listening to Bruce Sussman, Jughead, Matt Savino. They're not listening to these guys, right? Finding out, oh, well, today you may want to avoid the Sea of Galilee. We've got some gale force winds that are coming in off the Mediterranean, and it may cause some rough seas for you. You don't have any of that, right? No gale force warnings go out, nor tornado watches. So these men, they're on the boat. Now, Jesus stayed behind, and he stayed behind because, remember, before he fed the 5,000, he was trying to take a small vacation, right? He was trying to rest. At this point, he stayed behind to actually get that rest. Now, his form of resting isn't just going and taking a nap. It's not, running through the fields or, what have you. He went and he spent time alone by himself with his Father. So he went and spent some time in prayer. One of the things that I find interesting is these men were out on the sea alone. And does anybody remember the majority what their jobs were? Fishermen, right? So they're out in the middle of the sea, a sea that I would say that they've spent time on. They're used to the weather, issues and that type of thing. And before he even walked out to them, they were having a tough time, right? In Mark, it said that he saw them struggling at the oars. He saw them fighting the wind. They were already frightened. These are fishermen that spent their time out in boats. They were scared. People that were prepared, probably more than any of us would be. Any of you been out even off the continental shelf in a boat? Michael? Myself, a short time as I took the ferry to Victoria Island. I took the one that goes off the continental shelf, and you can tell immediately. Now, I imagine the seas were probably a lot rougher than what I experienced, and it was a calm day when I was going through. But you get off that shelf, and still, just major rocking waves. And I don't suffer from motion sickness, thankfully, but I could imagine suffering from motion sickness after that experience. This was, it may have been in a lake, but with the weather conditions and everything, they're struggling at the oars. They're just tiring themselves out. And in addition to that, the man that they've basically hitched their wagon to, the man that they're looking up to, this great teacher, isn't even with them. So what are they to do? They're a little scared. While Jesus is away praying, he sees them experiencing this. While he's away praying, he understands what they're going through. He sees what they're going through. He's with them even though they can't see him. And then he walks. Now, it says he's walking to get to the other side. He walks by them and manages to see it. In these rough seas, they catch a glimpse of it. And of course, nobody walks on water, right? So that scares them even more. What the heck's going on? So as they're experiencing this, as he comes to them, they don't believe that it's really him. Even though he says, "What's up, guys?" Right? So Peter says, "If it's really you, let me walk out to you." So Jesus says, "Sure, come on." So he takes that first step onto the water. And without thinking about it, just doing it with his eyes on the Lord, with his eyes on Jesus, he starts walking towards him on the water. And then wait a second. The wind, the waves, the water crashing all around him, he takes his eyes off Jesus. And as soon as he does that, he starts to sink. As soon as the fear gets into him again, he starts to sink. But when his eyes were on Jesus, when his eyes were on God, he didn't pay attention to all the turmoil going on around him. could walk on water. So these men, these fishermen, they've spent time in boats, they've spent time on seas, probably even at times rougher than what they were experiencing. But it was dark, it was stormy, they were struggling, and they see this thing, something that scares them, coming towards them across the top of